Okay, then that takes us to item 8.9. This is a referral from the Policy and Sustainability Committee. It's a response to the Council motion on whistleblowing culture, and we have a cross-party amendment on this item.
Thank you, Gavin. Just for members' interest, the reason that I have put this to the top of agenda is we have an external advisor who's going to be available to answer some questions, Tom Stoker, who I'll ask to introduce himself very shortly, and it's just to facilitate that outside person rather than having them sitting about all day, deal with it first. Now, last council meeting I indicated that this was coming back and that questions would be allowed by members, and we have the Chief Executive and Tom Stoker present to be able to answer those questions. However, I'm very keen that this stays on the A agenda and doesn't go to the B agenda, and to that end I just want to highlight areas where I would ask members to consider carefully before they think about asking questions in those areas, because they may cause me to take this to a B agenda item and close down the video broadcast, which I don't think is necessarily in the best interests of the democratic process. So any questions on any individuals, whether that be part of an old investigation or a current investigation, details of any victims or others affected by the subject of the investigation, any discussion on employees' terms, conditions or disciplinary processes, any terms proposed or to be proposed regarding the supply of goods and services in relation to any investigation, and any action taken or to be taken in connection with the prevention, investigation or prosecution of crime. So what we can discuss obviously is process, timescales, etc. So I'll just ask members to be cognizant of that briefing. As I say, my intention is to keep this on the A agenda and broadcast for the public to see, but I'll be in constant discussion with Gavin King and Nick Smith, monitoring the content of questions, and if we get to the stage where we think a question is taking us to the B agenda, we will have no alternative but to go there. So please try and work with us on this. I think it's in the best interests of everybody so to do. Right, so before we move on to the paper itself and the cross-party amendment, I'd just like Tom Stoker to introduce himself, who he is and the reason for his purpose to be here, just so that all members are have the same knowledge. So Tom, if you're available.
I am. Good morning, Lord Provost, and good morning, councillors. Thank you for the invitation to join you this morning. My name's Tom Stoker. I'm a partner at Pinsent Masons, which is a law firm, an international law firm, but with a big presence here in Edinburgh. My role at the law firm is to lead our investigations practice, and I've been asked to lead the investigations that are being commissioned by the council, subject to the terms of reference being finalised in the appointment of an independent chair. I'm very happy to join you this morning to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Tom. We'll move on to the paper now, and Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you very much, Lord Provost, and thank you to Tom and indeed other officers for the work they've done already today in this space. Obviously, there's two action points in relation to the paper and the amendment that are put forward right now. There's one, an investigation which has already started and is important to begin in earnest and conclude in earnest. And there's another one around how we assure ourselves as elected members that the culture of our organisation is as strong, as open and transparent as it possibly can be. And that's the subject of the amendment put forward. I should say right now, Lord Provost, thank you to my other colleagues in leaders across the council. I think all parties have approached this very responsibly, with cognizance of our own responsibility as elected members for dealing with these issues and exploring them to make sure we have that assurance, but also taking cognizance of the very obvious impact that these issues can have on our staff and real people, be them victims or former or current staff members. So I'm very grateful to the way people have constructively engaged in this, and I think we've ended up in a strong place. I am keen to see the process begin as quickly as possible and us to start learning lessons as a council from that, if indeed there are issues to be arisen from it. I go back to the point about assurance. It's in all our interests, all 63 councillors' interest, to make sure that the organisational culture which exists right across the board in our council and in public service more generally, but obviously we're responsible for our council, is open, is transparent, and people who want to and need to and should feel obligated to raise issues get the support that they need through doing so that in a day-to-day way of a council operating, which is a big organisation with 18,000 people roughly working for it in a whole range of services, many of them in very acute areas, behalf of very vulnerable people within our communities, that people feel able and empowered to raise issues regularly with their line managers, and crucially those issues will be dealt with effectively and swiftly. So building that culture of openness, of transparency, of accountability and empowering, I think is absolutely crucial to how we go forward as a council. That's very much been what I think all elected members have driven in all their time elected. I've been on the council for 8 and a bit years and already seen change in this space. Councillors who have been here longer will have seen even more dramatic changes over the times that they've been here in this space. But it's important that we don't rest on our laurels, take our foot off the gas, or lose sight of the importance of getting the assurance we need as elected members that our organisation is as open and transparent as possible, because it's to the benefit of our staff, to the benefit of our service users right across the city, and crucially the entire city itself. So with that, I'll propose, and happy to propose, the cross-party amendment as well.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. And to second the cross-party amendment, Councillor White.
Thank you, Lord Provost. As you'll know, this issue came to the Council through the emergency motion we lodged at last full Council meeting, and then the discussion we've had at Policy and Sustainability Committee since then, when I know there were a number of questions asked of the Chief Executive and his team and of Mr Stalker. So I hope those have exhausted some of the immediate questions people have. Like Councillor McVeigh, I'm grateful to the other group leaders for working collaboratively on this to get to a stage where we have a joint approach that we can propose to Council today as to how inquiries are taken forward. I also agree with Councillor McVeigh that the Council has to have as open an approach and a culture as we possibly can. This is fair to staff and the public and ensures great probity. In doing that, we have to investigate some of the issues that have come to us, perhaps from the past, but some indicating that there might be elements of issues in culture still relevant today. If we're going to remove that thought from the public mind, we have to have a full and open inquiry that shows where there are issues and how we can address them, and then agree to a method and a process to do that. And that can only be done if such an inquiry is independent and seen properly to be independent and trusted, and reporting back directly to us as councillors to allow us to take action as necessary as the governors of this organisation. I believe we're getting pretty much there with what we've put forward today. There will obviously be a number of issues that come as time goes on, but we have an agreement on how we can take that forward. And that has to be taken forward in a way that gains the confidence of people out with the Council, that they can come forward with any information that would help the inquiry so that it can be addressed and results taken from it that help make this a better Council for the future and better able to serve the people of Edinburgh. So with that, as I say, I thank my colleagues in other groups, and I trust that the actions we're taking to ensure that we have a truly independent chair, chosen from a variety of candidates, and to allow them to be involved in setting the remit of the wider inquiry that we're talking about, will ensure that we can get to the stage that we all want to, where the council improves its reputation going forward. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Councillor White. Just to answer Councillor Arthur's question about have we gone formal without a chance of answering questions, the answer is no here. I'm trying to be quite flexible on this, and I wanted to ensure that the cross-party amendment was actually tabled so that we all understood the starting point of this debate. That perhaps isn't totally in line with procedure, but I think it's the best thing in terms of openness and transparency. So I hope you'll just give me a little bit of leeway on that, colleagues. Councillor Perry.
So I didn't have a question, Frank. It was a contribution. So I think you want to take questions first here.
If I'm being honest, Ian, I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to take people in the order that they came in. I think we'll all get there in the end.
Okay, right. While I have no intention of minimising the seriousness of the incidents we have asked the independent panel to investigate, I want to suggest that we need to put them in context and in the process hopefully reassure members that we're not facing a crisis in the care of young people in Edinburgh, despite what has been suggested by some commentators. Firstly, it has to be remembered that the first reported incident happened in 1998, over 20 years ago, and the second incident happened 10 years ago, and during that time the Council's policies improvement and procedures have improved substantially. For instance, we now have a political scrutiny system which allows opposition parties to scrutinise every aspect of the Council's policies and procedures, including those in the care service. Scrutiny was initially established in 2003 when we were a cabinet system of governments with the sole purpose to create a more open and transparent council. Indeed, if memory serves me correct, we had 5 scrutiny committees at that time. Today we have just one, the Governance, Risk and Best Value Committee, chaired by Councillor Mowat. In order to further promote the openness and transparency of the Council, in 2014 we asked SafeCall to establish a whistleblowing procedure. SafeCall, a totally independent organisation with no formal links to the Council, that ensures all whistleblowers are protected. And SafeCall reports directly to the Government's Risk and Best Value Committee, and it's they who decide what to do with SafeCall's recommendations. In relation to the Council's provision for the care of young people, they are regularly inspected. The new improved inspection system under the Care Commission, which was established by the Scottish Government in 2011, Edinburgh was last inspected in 2019 and was rated very good. Our care homes are also inspected every year by the Care Commission, and this year they were also rated very good. Now, while I'm not suggesting we've got everything absolutely right and can give no absolute guarantee, I do think we can take comfort from the fact we now have a fairly robust set of policies and procedures in place. Let me repeat, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that incidents that are being investigated are not serious, nor am I suggesting we can't improve. Indeed, the motion we'll be debating later on in the Council suggests a number of improvements in relation to the information that members receive. But what I'm saying is, over the years, the changes we have made have led to the introduction of a more robust set of policies and procedures which will help us support and protect the young people in our care. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and I'd like to make a contribution and a question, if that's okay with you. I support all the comments about that Councillor McVeigh and Councillor White have said about across the party. It's been really helpful to get everybody on the same page as we take this issue forward, and I think all of us expect this to be an open and transparent process, but also one that's effective and also fair to everybody that's involved in it. And for me, this needs to be from the top. And from the top, I mean councillors, elected members, and our senior management team. And sometimes we maybe need to question our own behaviour towards some officers as well. And I hope that that is a part of the review. It's for all of us, whether you're an officer of the council or an elected member, to maintain the best standards that we can in our duties to the people of Edinburgh. And keep in mind, it's us as elected members cross-party that appoint our senior management team, and it's for all of us, as Ian said as well, through GRB in addition, to hold officers to account and to do that fairly and robustly. I support all the comments that Councillor McVeigh and Councillor White and Perry have made so far, and I think we do, as Councillor Perry said, have a fair and robust process with the safe call procedures. Yeah. Maybe I'll just end on a question, Lord Provost, or Tom probably. Tom, will you be able to ensure us that officers are also able to provide evidence to an inquiry of inappropriate behaviour from elected members?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councillor Dave, for your observations and your questions, and also to Councillor Perry for his observations. I think in respect to that, balance is very, very important in these sorts of reviews. As I think I said at the policy committee last week, I would welcome speaking with all and any councillor that wishes to speak with me, and for that matter any other interested person regarding behaviours, conducts, concern, thoughts on whistleblowing culture. So yes, we will be inviting every councillor who wishes to provide us with information, ideally facts, but also thoughts, to speak with us.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Convener. There is the potential for people coming forward to find sort of disclosing details of incidents traumatic. Is trauma-informed support being arranged for any person involved in the investigation who needs it?
Thank you, Councillor Watt. I'm very conscious of that issue. The Council has put in place counselling support, and that is being made available to anybody who wishes to avail themselves of it. I don't know if Mr. Carr is on this at this meeting, so maybe he could explain that a bit more fully.
Yeah, we have already been approached by a number of members of staff on this issue, Councillor Watt, and but also we have offered that support, that kind of support, to any member of particularly the Children and Families Service, as you may understand right now, in that area. So that has already been dealt with, and I can give Council assurance that that will continue all the way through this investigation.
Thank you. Councillor Dickey.
Thank you, Lord Provost. It's a contribution and 2 or 3 questions. I'm not here to conclude to the report. I'm not here to present us all in rose-coloured spectacles. I think this is a time to be open and transparent, and to absolutely welcome scrutiny and an inquiry, an independent inquiry. So that is really what I'm looking for. I'm looking very much for an independent inquiry, and I'm looking for everybody's concerns to be considered. And I know I've had many over the 2+3 years. So that is where our starting point is. And I'm just really glad we've got cross-party consensus out there. There are people watching this who will need reassurance in all different ways. And I think this is why this report, this debate right now has to be honest and real, and show that openness, transparency, rather than defence, and start from the right starting point. So I just want to ask 2 or 3 questions in the back of that. And it might be more, I think, probably heading Tom's way. And Tom, I actually asked this before, and it's just so important that these questions, and I know you've kind of answered them before, and yet one of them actually quite thoroughly, but just for the purpose of full council. So basically, the important bit is that everybody is able to come forward, and there is a bit of a list in that report there. But anyone, including formal whistleblowers who feel their concerns weren't addressed, or former staff, whoever. And the report, because of some of the things it says in there, already robustly investigated, might seem to some to conclude. So I just would like that reassurance again that anyone and that no one will be prevented from coming forward and sharing information that will be considered by you. The other one was around, you mentioned how some staff or whoever it is, it's a brave thing to do is to come forward and to whistleblow. And I suppose when it's an inquiry about the council, it's about how they do that, and they want to do it directly to you. They want to do it, to not feel it's going through the council, because it's a big thing to do that. So you mentioned last time your details. You would even be giving your direct details out. I think there was a little bit of vagueness about how that would be promoted, because it's not just within the council, it's like out with. How do people know about that? How do they get access to that? And the final question would be, if it was a council staff member, I presume they don't have to seek approval from their manager, and that people won't see their concerns, and again they'll go direct for you. It's just to ensure that everybody has the opportunity to do this properly and right from the beginning.
Thank you, Councillor Dickey. We had a bit of a discussion on this at the policy meeting on the 6th of October, and on that or at that meeting, I said I was very happy to be contacted directly. So my contact details, my email address, my direct dial, and my mobile telephone number are available at Pinsent Masons on the website. So www.pinsentmasons.com. Since stating that at the policy meeting, I have been contacted directly by people, so I have had conversations already. I repeat that I'm very happy to be contacted directly. Now, there are a couple of points. One is that this review is to look at the whistleblowing culture of the organisation. It is not a substitute for Safe Call or the whistleblowing line. So if employees or service users have current and live concerns about misconduct, they should report that to Safe Call rather than to me. Also, if anybody has a concern about matters which could involve the criminal law, then I would encourage them to report that matter directly to the police as well as to Safe Call. Now, there may be that people will contact me and what they're raising are live issues that need to be investigated outside of my parameters. And if that arises, I would be directing them back to Safe Call. What we'll do is we'll keep an eye on those matters to make sure that they are being investigated and that they don't then need to come back into the wider cultural review. You also raise a very important issue about giving people the confidence to come forward. So I am able to give a degree of assurance around confidentiality. If people wish to speak to me on a confidential basis, then I will respect that confidentiality. So people's names will not be noted. They will certainly not be passed on to the council, and no details will be passed on. However, as with all matters of this nature, there are some limitations to that confidentiality. So, for example, if people are reporting to me issues of a criminal nature, then I cannot completely guarantee their confidentiality. I would be encouraging them to report matters to the police, but I myself would need to think about my obligations and duties to do so. Also, there's always the potential that there might be some follow-up litigation, whether that's in the form of employee tribunals or claims by third parties. And there is a possibility that I could face an order to disclose details. So the confidentiality assurances that I will give, and I'll do my very, very best to live up to, are not without limitations. And I will explain that to people I've already spoken to, I've explained it to, and I will explain it to everybody else going forward. I hope that gives you some assurances, Councillor Dickey.
Great, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Tom. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Lord Provost. in respect to the report, it does seem, it's a question both probably for Mr Stalker and for Mr Kerr as well. As I said, it does seem open-ended, both in terms of financial cost and duration. What are the limits in terms of cost and in duration of this report? Because again, that's something that's not tackled in the papers that are before us.
Yeah, I think that is a very pertinent point. The paper before you is quite open-ended. It's quite vague in terms of the scope. There is a terms of reference process that's underway. So terms of reference are being drafted by me in the first instance. But once you have an independent chair, the terms of reference will be decided by the independent chair and ultimately the council leadership. The timeline and the budget will ultimately turn on the terms of reference. And my encouragement to those who ultimately decide the terms of reference, and it's not me, but those who decide it, is that the terms of reference need to have clearly defined parameters. Because without that, this will become unwieldy, it will go on for a long time, and it will be very expensive. So we need to have clearly defined parameters, and appreciate there will be debate and ultimately there will be disagreement about the parameters, but it is absolutely essential. And I have to say, I am not going to work to parameters that are vague and open-ended. I need to know what the scope of my investigation is going to be, and that is still to be determined.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Andrew, do you want to make any comment to that?
Yeah, I think there's two things to say, Lord Provost. First of all, this is almost a two-phase investigation, although there'll be some overlap, one of which is for the obviously very serious nature of the current incident, which needs to be investigated as quickly as possible, and will hopefully come to a conclusion and fairly swiftly. However, then there's a second investigation, which Tom's quite right, we need to make sure we've got complete clarity about what the role of that is. I intend that when we report this to Council from now, we will put a budget in for this investigation, because whatever way you define this, it will be considerable, and I'm going to make sure that that is indicated in any budget consideration we make at Finance and Resources Committee and ultimately at Council for budget setting.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Councillor Bridgman.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I have a question for Mr Stalker, please.
On you go.
Sorry, yeah. I watched P&S on the webcast last week with great interest, and one of the things I was conscious of that was in the discussion was how contributions were going to be encouraged, and how this, what the comms work stream was going to be like that sat around this. And during the conversation, it was very much around current employees, but I think it's fair to say that the investigation will need contributions from past employees, service users, and other people who have been impacted on this. So can you maybe give me a little overview of how the comms will actually bring in these groups that are impacted and need to contribute? And if Mr Kerr wants to contribute to this as well, it'd be good to hear that too. Thanks.
Yeah, sir. I think it's a very pertinent observation. That the comms strategy hasn't been landed. It's something we will need to discuss with the independent chair and indeed the executive and the council leaders. So in general terms, I would anticipate firstly there will be an all-staff communication issued within the council encouraging people to come forward. I'm giving consideration to things like undertaking a staff-wide survey. In respect of former employees, there are two key routes to that. One is people who come forward and speak with us. They mention, and they already have mentioned, the names of people who we should speak with, and we will contact those people directly and see if they're willing to engage with the review. And then there will need to be a wider comms strategy. Now, whether that's a newspaper advertisement or something on the City of Edinburgh Council website, or something on my website, that still needs to be determined. But there will be a communication strategy to encourage former people non-employees to engage with the process. Andrew, is there anything you wish to say on that?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you've just said, Tom. I think it's necessary we make sure we communicate. Once we've got the terms of reference defined, I think the danger of communicating something vague is just as bad as not getting the terms of reference right. So we'll make sure that's the case. And what I can assure Council is we'll make sure you're all aware of what that communication strategy is, which we'll need to agree. Now, undoubtedly, the staff will need to take part in that. Our communications team will need to take part in that process as well.
Okay, thank you. If I can just add to that slightly, it's good to hear about press. However, you know, it's not just within Edinburgh that people who work for the council live out with the city as well, and there'll be people who've been impacted, service users who no longer live immediately within the city. So I would hope that any communication strategy might include radio and, you know, further media rather than just that based in the immediate city area, and that we'd look at, you know, the surrounding areas as well, just to ensure that we get as many contributions as possible, please.
I think one of the things we should do and will do is consult with the council leaderships and any other councillor who wishes to discuss matters with us, and we'll get your views on how best to take the communications forward. So thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Doggart.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I have a couple of questions for the Chief Executive, all in a similar vein, so I'll just put them all together. I note from the amendment that's put in to the report that the Chief Executive himself has commissioned Pinsent Masons. So I wonder if he could tell councillors how he went about that process. What were the criteria for appointing Pinsent Masons, and what other alternatives were available to him?
Councillor Doggart, I guess, Tom, you're going to have to spare your blushes here in a minute. But so we had to consider, of course, in the first instance, Councillor Doggart, that this was an investigation about the unfortunate incident that just happened recently, and which I think we're all aware of, and there was an urgency to that matter. We looked for a law firm, or rather an advisor that had actually minimal connection with the council on other matters currently, but also had experience of investigatory matters. And Tom and his team have a UK, in fact, an international experience of investigatory matters. We considered that was the right place to go. We and then the need for urgency was that we should get on, as opposed to going for a procurement of another 3 or 4 potential firms. This is the right people to do the right job, and given that it was going to be independent, we felt it was appropriate to contact Pinsent Masons in that process. We then contacted Pinsent Masons generally, and then we had a conversation with Tom about their willingness to take this investigation, confirmed that he was available and his team were available to do so, and proceeded on that basis.
Would it be worth me just adding there, Councillor Doggart, there are 2 law firms in Scotland that are recognised by the legal directories, so there's independent legal directories, Legal 500 and Chambers and Partners for investigations work. One of those firms is on the City of Edinburgh Council's panel. The other firm is Pinsent Masons, and we're not on the City of Edinburgh Council panel.
Okay, thank you. Andrew and
Councillor
Tom.
just to add to that, it was just to try and make sure, and I hope you take this assurance, to try and get it as independent as it could whilst precipitating an investigation, because the investigation was very obviously needed to start to take place very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Lord Provost. It's a question for Mr. Stocker. Mr. Stocker, you have explained that you're in charge of the investigations unit at Pinsent Masons. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about what you think would be best practice for an investigation such as this, and perhaps what are the pitfalls that we should try and avoid when we're setting the remit or the terms of reference?
Yes, certainly. Well, best practice, and it's not required, but best practice is to have an investigation team, which is the role that Pinsent Masons have been asked to fulfil, and then to have an independent chair who sits above the investigation team and is there to give direction and an extra level of assurance that the investigation is being conducted independently, objectively, robustly, and importantly, fairly. The main pitfall with any, whether it's a public inquiry or a private inquiry, such as this, a non-statutory inquiry, the main pitfall is not defining your terms of reference tightly enough at the outset. Because unless you are clear as to what it is what the four walls of what you're looking into are, it becomes unwieldy, as I previously stated. Now, the other challenges are around giving assurances to people about confidentiality when I understand the council want transparency and disclosure. Well, that's sometimes difficult to reconcile with people's desire that their information is kept confidential. It can be challenging to reach conclusions if somebody says they want to be kept confidential, but they're making serious allegations against another individual. Well, you can't put those allegations sometimes to that person without disclosing details of what's alleged, and that risks identifying the source. So we have to navigate that very carefully in very close consultation with the people who are coming forwards. The other big challenge is around data protection law. There are very, very onerous obligations. I noticed Lord Provost Ross gave a data protection introduction. Well, we're all subject to data protection obligations that we must at all times fulfill and ensure that data is handled sensitively, securely, and proportionately, and that will feed into the terms of reference. This does need to be a proportionate and justified exercise. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Johnson.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Councillor Mowat.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I just wanted to come in with a quick comment, really. Councillor Perry said that SafeCall reports directly to GRBV, but actually it's filtered via officers, so it isn't a direct route to councillors. And I think that just needed to be cleared up and considered as part of that scope of the investigation. And obviously I'll be happy to discuss with that if there's further information required out with this, but I do think that is an important difference. It was, it's a huge improvement having SafeCall when that was introduced, when Councillor Balfour was the chair of GRBV, and it has uncovered a whole load of things. But I think, giving the impression that this belongs wholly with councillors is an incorrect impression, and we should just be clear to set that situation out at this stage. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mowat. Councillor Rose.
Thanks, Lord Provost. Mr Stalker, did I understand you to say that the terms of reference are being drafted by you?
Well, I have started work on terms of reference to help move forward the process. Those terms of reference may well be put in the bin, Councillor Rose. It's entirely a matter for the independent chair and also for the council leadership to set the terms of reference. I thought it would be helpful to, based on the information that I've been getting, to put some scope around this and some suggestions forward. But as I say, they might well not end up being the terms of reference that I ultimately work to. But information is coming into me, so I'm capturing that and suggesting some scopes and parameters around it. And I hope that will be helpful going forward to help move things forward in a timely manner, which is I think an important objective.
Thank you. Can I from that understand that inquiry will not begin until the chair is appointed and agrees the terms of reference?
Formally, yes. Practically, people are contacting us already because I have invited people to contact me. Now, there are, as you're aware, there are two investigations. the council here are considering the wider cultural review investigation. The more immediate specific investigation is underway. It has to be progressed expeditiously. We cannot await an independent chair being appointed, because you have duties to employees who are affected by that specific investigation. So we are progressing that matter. The wider investigation is not formally underway, but when people contact me, I do not know whether they're contacting me in regard to a specific issue relevant to the first investigation or an issue that's more relevant to the wider investigation. And some of the conversations that I have had have actually related to the wider investigation. But the only alternative would be for me to say to people, I cannot currently speak with you. I think that would be counterproductive.
Is it your understanding that you are doing both investigations?
What is proposed is that I will oversee the investigation teams, but we will have two investigation teams, one team focused on the immediate issue, and then another investigation team focused on the wider review. I'll be bringing in colleagues from my Manchester office to deal with the immediate investigation. That's been done to give an extra level of independence.
Thank you. Lord Provost, may I ask the Chief Executive a couple of questions?
Absolutely, Councillor Rose, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Kerr, we've heard there that Pinsent Masons understand they're doing both investigations. Has that been agreed?
Councillor Rose, that was the subject of the paper that went to PNS, which was the suggestion in the PNS. If the group leaders and the leaders of the council do not want that to happen, that can of course be changed, but it seems sensible, given that some of the wider issues will come out as a result of the first investigation, that there is some link between the two, and therefore a firm doing both seems to be the right answer.
Mr. Kerr, I noted you used the words earlier, urgency and start very quickly.
Yes.
It doesn't appear to have started very quickly.
Well, the investigation, as Tom just outlined, the investigation of the first matter has already been set up in terms of personnel working on it and starting to investigate the matters around the first investigation. But in the need for independence, it has been subject to a process with the group leaders and a paper to PNS committee, as you're well aware.
Can you clarify what are the connections that Pinsent Mason have with the council? Prior to them being selected, I think there was a reference from Mr. Stalker earlier on to their independence and minimal contact with the council, minimal representation on behalf of the council.
Well, shall I pick that up, Andrew?
Yeah, that'd be sensible.
I don't think I used the word minimal contact. We have had contact with the council. We're an Edinburgh firm. We do have touch points with the council. We're not on the council's legal panel currently. We used to be on the council's legal panel, which is why I am known to the council. I have previously, in the last 6 years, done, I think, 3 health and safety related matters or advised the environmental services team in respect of 3 health and safety cases over a 6-year period. I have 1 legacy matter that is actually currently assisted with a tribunal, health and safety related. The work that we used to do for the council when we were on the panel was primarily commercial property related, and didn't involve investigations or any other relevant work to these inquiries. But there are touch points, and I readily recognise that.
Did you not represent the council in the tram inquiry in some form?
Yes, there was a partner in the firm. Not me personally, but a partner in the firm was involved in the tram inquiry, yes.
Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Barry.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Just a comment on a thought for the future. I'm pleased to say that I have been involved in the process in bringing forward this amendment, and that has gone very well. I'm quick to complain when independent councillors are not involved, so I think it's right to put on record that I have been involved in this. I also note at point D, and although I'm satisfied with the wording, that regular updates will be provided to group leaders. Now, I'm absolutely sure that group leaders, where appropriate, will then update their group members on what the knowledge they have. Perhaps not in great detail, but where appropriate. But I'm very conscious that we have a number of councillors who are not members of groups. So I'd like perhaps the Chief Executive, Mr. Stalker, and perhaps the other group leaders to bear in mind that somewhere along the line a methodology has to be found to make sure that all councillors receive some kind of update as things go on. Thank you.
Tom, I'll take this one first, so I can give Councillor Barry that assurance. We'll make sure there is a part of the communication strategy is about making sure that everybody appropriate is informed. We understand, I think, that this could be one or more of all your constituents involved in this process, and we need to make sure that there's a communication going on. As Tom pointed out, we can only have to pay, well, not only have to pay attention, we do have to pay attention to things like data protection, etc., and making sure that whistleblowers are protected as we do now through the system we've got, and we'll have to continue to do that. But within those parameters, we'll make sure that people are informed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor White.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Mr. Stalker talked about the difficulty in an inquiry where you have no remit and how wide that can be. It's my understanding from Mr. Kerr that your firm, Mr. Stalker, were involved in the Casey review into Rotherham Council. Could you let us know if that was the case, and whether or not you think that the appropriate bits of the remit of that inquiry might be a good starting point for this council in this case? It's certainly something I've suggested to fellow group leaders.
You'll understand, Councillor White, I can't get into, particularly in a public forum, matters that my firm have previously advised, and we've been involved in a number of inquiries and sensitive inquiries which are relevant to this inquiry. We do have terms of reference that we've used for those inquiries, and we will share them as appropriate with the council to help inform the terms of reference for this inquiry.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I'm not sure if it's best to give my questions all at once or not, but I'll try to sort of separate out what I'm asking, and these are addressed to both gentlemen, please. So Mr. Stalker has confirmed that the first investigation is underway. In that connection, in picking up on Mr. Kerr's response to a previous question, am I correct in understanding that CEC personnel are involved in the first investigation that's underway? So that's my first question.
So just to clarify, do you mean in terms of our reporting lines?
No, in terms of the actual investigation and the involvement of CEC staff. What is their involvement? Well, it's addressed to both. So Mr. Kerr is obviously our head of paid service. So I'm just keen to understand on what basis CEC personnel are involved in the first investigation that you've kindly confirmed is underway. Please.
Tom, I'm happy to take that in the first instance. Just what I can confirm is we have not taken any investigatory activity as part of this investigation. But what I can confirm as head of paid service is that we've taken action to ensure security of information, and where there has been potential involvement by any of our staff taking appropriate precautionary disciplinary action to ensure that's the case.
Okay.
From my perspective, yes, there is a team at the council who I liaise with for the purpose of securing information. I appreciate there could be concerns about whether they are sufficiently impartial to be the providers of information to us. But this isn't a usual lawyer-client relationship in that I'm not going to those people and seeking their instructions or their advice. I am telling them what information I require them to produce, and they are working extremely hard to identify that relevant information and to provide it to the investigation team.
Thank you. My second question relates to what Mr. Stalker told us about how staff should still refer current complaints to SafeCall, that your review is not a substitute for SafeCall, and subject to what the issues were, they should, if they involve a matter of criminal law, they should be reported to the police. In terms of SafeCall, given that procedure refers issues to our internal legal officers, how do we ensure that we overcome any, because I think that's possibly an issue that causes reluctance or worry or concern in staff coming forward. So how could we address that? And I do understand, and thank you for being clear about that you're receiving all the information and how some information is directly related to the first investigation and some will spill over. And I understand the complexity of that. But, you know, I suppose for us as elected members, how can we be assured that people who are coming to you and you're saying perhaps take that to SafeCall, that they're going to follow through with that happens, because we need to be confident if we're really determined to sort of address this fully and comprehensively. So I suppose that's a kind of question in my mind about how we address that, please.
I understand that. So we've put in place a governance and information sharing protocol, which entails that if there are matters reported to SafeCall which touch upon the first investigation in any way, and those matters are reported to us directly from SafeCall. So it's not filtered through the council. But I do have to say, I think it's very important that the existing whistleblowing policy is followed. It is a council approved policy, and if we start investigating matters outside the parameters of, or the council starts investigating matters outside the parameters of that whistleblowing policy, there is a risk that those investigations are unlawful, and therefore it must, the policy that is in place must still be followed, and we must encourage people to adhere to the existing policy until such time, if there are findings that improvement need to be made, until such time as that is put through in the proper manner. The other safety net is that people can, if they wish, contact me directly. I encourage them to do so. I will speak with them very openly about whether the matter does ultimately come within the scope of our investigation. I'm keeping a fairly generous view on that at the moment, really picking up on Councillor Rose's point, because the terms of reference have yet to be concluded. But ultimately, we will need to reach a landing as to whether something is a matter for us or whether it's appropriately dealt with by SafeCall and your existing processes.
Thank you.
Councillor Cameron, if it's helpful, just to add to what Tom's indicated. We have a similar relationship with SafeCall, but again, equally, there is no filtering by any of the officers of the SafeCall's request for information in any of these whistleblowing matters. That's part of the process that Tom's just described, and we would intend that the investigation is undertaken in exactly the same way as just Tom's just described. So there's a number of safeguards.
Thank you. third and hopefully final question is around the whole transparency and governance around this in terms of the remit, and other colleagues have commented on it's important to have a focused remit and timescale and budget and all of that. Given that this investigation, ultimately it's the 63 members of the council who are the council who are ultimately responsible, and I suppose what I'm asking, I mean, in response to, I don't know if it was, can't remember if it was Councillor Rose or Councillor Doggert's question, Mr Kerr talked about we decided, I don't know who the we, I think it was to do with commissioning Pinsent Masons. I don't know, I'm not sure who the we was in terms of Mr Kerr's response. But nevertheless, what I'm really asking is, for the sake of being serious and credible about openness and transparency, surely all elected members have to, as council, be involved in the setting and agreeing and approving of the parameters of the investigation, because we are all responsible. And I accept that we also could be subject to referrals to the system for regarding elected member behaviour. So my question is really, is that going to happen? And if not, why not? If we're serious about openness and governance, why are things being referred just to either internally or to P&S committee when all of us have the shared responsibility? It's incumbent on all of us. And as Councillor Barry said, you know, not all of us are in political groups, for example. This is such a serious matter that I would really welcome a commitment to taking the remit and the parameters, etc., to full council. We're having a very, I believe, sensible, positive discussion at full council this morning. So on this with yourselves. So I see no reason why full council cannot be the place where the remit and the parameters and the scrutiny happens.
Tom, there was two parts to that question, Councillor Cameron, I believe. I'll try and answer the first part maybe first, and then Tom can, with me, maybe answer the second one. It was as head of paid service that I decided we had to get on with the investigation. That's the first investigation, Councillor Cameron, not the wider cultural review, which was as a result of Councillor White's motion to council after this incident happened. And I think you know the incident happened. We believe this was a staffing matter that had to be dealt with very quickly. We had a limited amount of information from the previous criminal investigation. And without going any further into that, it was in the best interests of staff. We had already taken precautionary disciplinary action. And as I think Tom has already pointed out, it is necessary in law to get on with the investigation to make it happen in that sense. The wider investigation has come from the motion to Councillor White, and actually any terms of reference will be agreed in conjunction with the group leaders, and any reporting formally to Council will need to be decided ultimately by Council where it's reported. Because what I would say to you is that in any decisions made, that the group leaders do not constitute a formal committee of the council. They are, of course, the senior members who are advising the council and advising this investigation. But any decision made as a result of any of these investigations will need to be reported to the appropriate committee. And I don't know right now whether that's council or P&S or FNR or any committee of the council yet, until we get terms of reference agreed in both cases.
And I don't think I can add anything to that, Andrew. I mean, ultimately, this is a matter for your good selves to decide and resolve.
Thank you.
I'm doing this investigation for the council, not for Mr. Carr, paid services, or anybody else, but for the council.
Thank you.
Councillor Mean.
Thank you, Lord Provost. And this has been a really helpful discussion and really informative this morning. I'm very pleased to hear Mr. Stalker explain that he requires clear, defined parameters to work to, because I do think that that's going to be the key to some good outcomes for the council. I just wanted to comment, ask one of the leaders in leaders' meetings, and I think unfortunately Councillor Barry was unable to join us at one meeting. We did discuss the governance of leaders' meetings when it comes to the investigation, and we have. I think I can say that we are, as leaders, very clear that these meetings that we have about this investigation will be minuted, and there will be a clear record. And I would expect that that will give reassurance to councillors that this is not happening behind closed doors, but it is a good way to go forward. But there will be governance around what we are doing as leaders, and I think that's right and proper. I'm very pleased that we've had constructive discussions with the leaders, and I think we are all agreed that we want to ensure that the process is open and transparent and independent, and I very much hope that Council will get confidence from today's discussions that that will be the case and support this way forward. The Green Group does recognise and believes that this inquiry will allow us to learn from the past. Because council culture going forward, I think for everyone, our aim is that it's a healthy one, that it's open and it's supportive, and that both councillors and our staff have confidence and trust going forward. So thank you, Lord Provost, and I very much hope that the council can support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Main. Councillor Gordon.
It's a few questions, Lord Provost. Thank you. I'll take them all as a winner and then get a response, hopefully. I'd like to pin down the fact that no council staff are actually involved at this stage in the investigation. That's the first one. I'd like to find out how much work is underway with the first investigation at this stage. And the final one is to make sure that anybody can actually, as of today, now, actually contribute to this. That's within the council and without, to share their experience on an ongoing basis. Because I'm really concerned that we're going to delay this process, and I want this to start as soon as possible.
Who wishes to take that first, Andrew?
Yeah, there's almost two parts again to that question. So I can give you assurance on the third one, Councillor Gordon, which is about the openness. I think we've had that discussion about how available the investigation team is. Tom's investigation team, they're undertaking the investigation. We've provided staff, one of our legal team, to provide information to Tom's investigation, and he will be actually permanently on the investigation until it's concluded, so we can conclude it quickly. I don't feel I would want to comment on the first investigation any further, because this does involve our staff and in both paying attention to their well-being and the need to investigate this properly and independently. It would be inappropriate for me to comment any further about what work we've already done. What I can give you the assurance is that this is not investigating ourselves, if that's been the gist of your question, Councillor Gordon.
Tom, do you have anything to add?
I would just echo what Andrew said. It's been very useful that somebody at the council has been assigned the full-time responsibility for liaising with us. There's lots of documents that are needing to be gone through, scopes to be undertaken and thought about, particularly in respect of the first investigation. We really do need to make progress with that and to make some interim findings fairly swiftly. With regard to the wider investigation, because the independent chair and the terms of reference haven't been put in place, there is what I would describe as scoping preparatory work, but there's no actual investigation work underway until that is duly approved.
Just to clarify, do we have a time frame for all this? Because I mean, are we talking? Do you have a specific time frame as to when the chair will be appointed and when the investigation can kick off, basically?
Sorry, Andrew, I think you wanted to go in first.
Yeah, just to say, first investigation will get going now, Councillor Gordon, and the independent chair will be appointed as swiftly as can be agreed with the group leaders. but that won't halt the first part of the investigation. The second part of the investigation, the wider investigation, will be conducted in the timescales agreed with the group leaders. That I don't think anyone should think this is swift in any way, though. I think even part one would seem likely that it will take a number of weeks, if not months, to undertake. And the wider investigation, depending on the terms of reference, will also take some time. So there is some considerable time to be taken to do this properly, as you would expect, as it involves individuals and staff and their well-being, etc.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Lord Provost. In my 3 years as a councillor, the most moving deputation that was, and the most articulate deputation that came to full council, was that of the looked after children, where all 63 of our councillors have an obligation, duty to look after for those young people. There's a similar duty to look after whistleblowers. I feel they're the unrepresented voice here, and they often put their careers on hold and can be subjected to abuse potentially. So I'm just wondering about the arrangements for, my specific question is about the arrangements for safe call and whether that can report not to the Legal Services Department, but directly to the Policy and Sustainability Committee, to ensure that the whistleblowers give them a degree of confidence and that their matters are properly addressed, because we have a duty of care to all whistleblowers as 63 councillors.
Okay. Andrew? You still?
Sorry, I'll just get my microphone back on. Sorry, Councillor. So the policy we have on whistleblowing, which is an exemplar used by the rest of Scotland, is a policy agreed by members currently and has been through committee, etc. I don't think you're suggesting that because our legal services department say that there is any filtering of that information before it goes to committee. At least I hope you're not. But it is overseen by, and any result is overseen by, GRB committee, and I take Councillor Mowatt's about the process that goes through. However, I think we are seen quite rightly by the rest of Scotland as having a very strong whistleblowing committee with an independent view from Safecall. If Safecall thought there was any reason that any member of our staff were likely to filter information, they would report directly to the committee. I don't believe that's occurred since 2014, and since it's been put in place, which is before I arrived in this council, and it seems to me very robust, much more robust than any other council I've been in, and I think you should take some confidence from that and the oversight of the GRBV committee, who look at the outcome of every single whistleblowing issue.
Councillor Jim Campbell.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and thank you for all the answers provided so far. I thought I was getting clarity, but I feel I've got a little bit more confused again on the nature of the two inquiries. I felt that we were talking about a narrow focused inquiry and then a broader focused inquiry looking at the cultural issues in the council. Have we got two separate inquiries, or have we simply got one inquiry with two parts?
Thank you. They're two separate inquiries. There is a degree of interconnectivity because they both have aspects of whistleblowing at their heart, and there is an element of issues around the culture in respect of investigation one, but they are two separate inquiries. There are two investigation teams. The investigations will be running in parallel. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, that does, Lord Provost. I do have a follow-up, if I may.
Yeah, certainly.
Thank you. That does clarify things. What I want to understand now is how the process of those two inquiries is managed so that the narrow focus inquiry can make rapid progress. And I'm disappointed if it's only just starting now. I would have expected it had already completed some substantial work by this date. So how do we ensure rapid progress in the narrow inquiry, while at the same time letting the broader inquiry taking a little bit of time to find a chair and establish terms of reference? I think you said that your Manchester office were helping with the narrow focus inquiry. Are there, and I accept that some information will have to flow between the two, but how do we achieve speed in one while still protecting a degree of space to determine the remit of the second?
Yes, I mean, in respect of the first inquiry, it was also supposed to be subject to oversight by an independent chair. So the time it's taken to appoint the independent chair has, I mean, that's good governance, it's the right thing to do, but the time it's taken has delayed the first investigation. That can't continue any longer. We just need to progress it. The same consideration doesn't apply to the wider review. I mean, the sooner we can get on with the wider review, the better, but it's not as pressing as the first matter. So we are progressing the work on investigation, on the first investigation. If an independent chair is to be appointed to cover that investigation, then we can't conclude that investigation until the chair is in place and is satisfied with the work that's undertaken. But we recognise that there is a need to progress it. The time it's taking is entirely down to this point about the independent chair and getting that person appointed.
And so, Tom, is it your working assumption that it will be the same independent chair for both inquiries, or potentially might it be different people?
I think that's a matter for the council. I think there's a lot of merit in it being the same person, because the learnings that will come out of the first investigation will be relevant to the second investigation, and therefore being pragmatic about it, and also looking to avoid unnecessary extra cost. I think having one investigation chair is the best route. If you're wanting to keep it entirely separate and have two investigation chairs, then yes, we can clearly do that. But do recognise that will cause extra work, it will cause overlap, and it will cause extra cost.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Now, I've got 4 members who wish to come back in, who will be allowed 1 question each, because I'm also conscious that we've been an hour and a half on this topic and we've had a very wide-ranging debate. But I have 1 member who hasn't asked a question yet. I'll take them first. Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think I'd like to thank people for the tone of the debate today. I think it reflects the seriousness of what's before us. I have to keep reminding myself, however, that the vast majority of council staff that I deal with day to day in this job are proud to be proud to be employed by the council and do an absolutely fantastic job. And I think we have to keep that first and foremost. And I hope this inquiry actually highlights good practice and how these types of problems have been dealt with by the council and by individuals every single day. My question comes back to the uncertainty, if I put it that way, around safe call. I think Mr. Kerr said that City of Edinburgh Council's approach is used as an exemplar elsewhere. I'd be reassured if outside this meeting Andrew Kerr could perhaps give us just a short note about where other people have adopted our best practice and how they've taken that forward. Not an exhaustive report, because I know everyone's busy, but just to be reassured on that point that really we are leading the way here. And I think that would help kind of pour cold water on that part of the debate, and perhaps we can focus on other issues.
I can provide a note, Councillor Ross, Chairman. Councillor Arthur, thanks for your question. What I would say is that the vast majority of councils, and I know this because, as you'll understand, I've been chief exec more than one place, the vast majority of councils do their whistleblowing directly through senior management. It was decided in 2014 because of previous experience of the council that needed to be more robust and more independent, and therefore Safecall as an organisation were employed to do so, and have done, in my view, a sterling job since 2014 in making that independence clear. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many councils have copied that, but we, our friends in Audit Scotland, etc., have all recognised how complete that system is in terms of ensuring an independent place where whistleblowers can go to and feel safe and be anonymous if that's what they require in this process. So I'm very happy to provide a note to give you that assurance.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I have 4 members who wish to come back in, 1 for clarification, 3 for 1 question each, just to clarify that. Councillor White.
Lord Provost, I think it's all for clarification.
Okay.
I'm keen that we clarify exactly where we are before we agree the motion that's been put forward, because it says in that motion that we note that the first investigation into the specific matters is now underway, and that group leaders have been consulted on the remit. I've certainly been consulted, and I've responded very quickly to that. So can I have clarification? I think it might help with some of the other questions that are coming up, that we are underway, that we're doing something on that, and we have a remit. And whether that's been agreed by all my fellow group leaders, I hope it has, that they've fed back any comments on it, but I've not seen that. But my more substantive question is around Mr. Stalker's reference to the Manchester team helping with this. If it's important that they help with this to provide a degree of independence, would he not say that that degree of independence is equally, if not more so important, to a much wider review of council culture?
Andrew, do you want to pick up on the first point as to where we are in terms of the terms of reference for the first investigation?
Sure, yes. So it's my understanding the group leaders have agreed the terms of reference, and as I say, the preparation is all ready for the investigation to start and investigation interviews to be taken, etc. But we are getting on as swiftly as we can, given the slight delay, and I think it is a slight delay, in trying to get to an independent chair previous to the investigation undertaken. We've now decided that that is something that will happen as part of that process to look at the independent chair, but the investigation will now get on with the investigation that needs to take place. The second one, Tom, I can't answer for you.
Councillor, I'll take that on board. There are 2 reasons for involving Manchester Team. One is a practical issue around making sure we've got the resource for the investigations. The other one is around independence. So I will look at the team for the wider review and ensure it's as independent as it can be. Thank you for the observation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dickey.
Thank you, Tom. I think you've actually heard quite strongly about the need for it to be independent from the council and to give people confidence to come forward and to give us reassurance. But my question is actually just about, I realise what I mentioned about delay, because I mean, reassurance, when you need reassurance, delay matters, and it's the timing that matters. So we've talked about the timescales there, but there's been past criticism that, delays to do with things like this. What kind of things would delay? So we're talking about spring and we're talking about these timescales, but what kind of things would delay it anymore? Because that is something that concerns me. And how would you actually reassure how things were getting addressed, even if there was a delay or whatever, especially regarding anything that was found?
I think actually delay is probably the wrong word. There's an awful lot that is required to. I think I touched upon this at the committee meeting last week. There's a lot of work that's required to scope investigations, set them up properly, put in place your governance protocols, your information sharing protocols. We have to go through a very rigorous data protection process. We need to do data protection impact assessments, which have to be signed off by the council's data protection officers and the data security team. That is a fairly involved process. So all of that work has been done. It has been progressed. Once we get the terms of reference signed off, which is ultimately a matter for the council and over to us, we will be underway immediately. So there isn't a delay as such. It has taken a bit of time to get it set up, but I think that is time that is actually extremely valuable. And going forward, matters will progress as swiftly as they can.
Okay,
apologies, Lord Provost, just to say that I didn't actually mean a delay at the beginning. I meant through the process, if it was delayed to complete and get findings.
So the time that gets taken is around, well, where I mean, investigations are iterative processes. They develop. You can have your terms of reference and your defined terms as tight as you possibly can, but if things arise, then we will need to follow them through. We're also dependent on people speaking with us when they wish to speak with us, what follow-up they require before they approve their accounts. That is a timely process.
Councillor Dickey, just to give, Councillor Ross, just sorry, Lord Provost, sorry, give me your proper title. Lord Provost, Councillor Dickey, we of course need a robust process to be put in place so that both potential victims in any case, but also staff who are potentially involved, have also some confidence in the process that has been dealt with fairly, etc., which is why it's important we get all the issues that Tom just outlined right at the beginning. I can see no reason, certainly in the first case, where there's any need for delay beyond us giving the terms of reference to Tom, and we'll be able to get on with it.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Rose.
Thanks, Lord Provost. Just a quick question on the question of independence and being seen to be independent, and this is for Mr. Kerr. You talked earlier about the opportunity for safe call in appropriate circumstances to report direct to councillors, possibly as the leader of the council or GRBV committee. I can't find anything that permits that in the whistleblowing policy which the council has, which from the paragraphs I'm looking for filter everything through various senior officers of the council. I'm just wondering whether it would be possible to put into the policy quickly that opportunity, because as far as I can see, it's simply not there at the moment, unless I've made a mistake.
Sorry, Councillor, that was my microphone. Councillor, thank you for your question. So the first thing to say is that councillors can go directly to safe call should they wish to. There is nothing in the policy that stops them doing that, and GRBV can ask for anything in terms of reporting directly to a committee or councillors in any matter, rather than it be filtered, as I think you used the language, filtered through senior officers. So I don't think it's change the policy, it might be to change the practice, Councillor Rose, it needs to be done.
Lord Provost, actually, my question was the other way. If safe call want to bypass senior officers.
Councillor Rose, I think it's a very pertinent point that you raise. It's one that we will be considering in terms of the wider review as to what are the appropriate reporting lines, and is there a need for another line directly to a committee or to somewhere else as part of our wider review. So I think it's a very pertinent point that you raise. It's one that we will be looking at and considering in the wider review.
Okay,
and
thank you.
Rose, just for everyone's concern, all council policies are reviewed every year. They're no different in this case. If there is a suggestion from the investigation that needs to change, there's no reason why that can't happen.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Councillor Mowat.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Yes, it pertains to slightly concerning, actually, listening to this, that there seems to be a bit of confusion about safe call and how that actually works. We've had another councillor, Councillor Garden, saying that it reports to legal services. It doesn't. It reports to the council's monitoring officer, and I think we need to make that clear. But I think the note that Councillor Arthur asked for, it would be helpful to append to that something about Safe Calls reporting current at the moment, and obviously the wider investigation will pick up whether we may want to amend those practices at the moment. As you have stated, whilst there is a power to request, it's not clear that there's a power on Safe Call's part to say, actually, we think you should see this without going via the monitoring officer. So I think we'll leave that aside for that, but just in the interim, I think that note that Mr. Kerr was going to be doing could be usefully expanded to put in the current situation and where this reports to.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Mowat. That brings to the end elected members wishing to make a contribution. If I can thank Mr. Stalker and Mr. Kerr for being available to answer questions, and also for the tone of the questioning and the debate. I think it's been exceptionally useful. It's a very delicate and deep subject, this, and I think it's been handled well. There is no contrary position to the cross-party motion, but I would ask the council leader if he would just like to say a few words in summing up.
Thank you, Lord Provost. And actually, Councillor Mowat, probably from our position as Chair GRBV, actually made some of the points in terms of clarification that I think are quite helpful, because for members' assurance and clarity, SafeCall does have that ability to go straight to me, as these are, if any, appropriate circumstances require it. I did want to say I think this was a useful exercise, and I think we heard a great deal of assurance from the Chief Executive and Tom, not only in terms of existing practice, in terms of the Council, but in terms of how this will be going forward to make sure that we get that additional assurance around culture. And I suppose I wanted to end with an assurance to elected members from me as Leader of the Council, and also one of the group leaders who will be taking this forward, that we will move as quickly as possible to a position where a chair is appointed and things can get moving and accelerated.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. So we're all agreed the report with the cross-party amendment agreed?